don't know if everybody will be able to see the screen. As I said last night, I'm not coming from the Mainline Protestant churches, but I'm going to just share with you something of what I do, which is largely traveling around the world, speaking at conferences and in churches, and talking on the whole issue of what I've called Christian Palestinianism, the anti-Israel crusade within the church. Should be working. That boycott of the Israeli dance company September this year was organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. This is one of the main leaders of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Anglican Evangelical Vicar, Reverend Dr. Stephen Sizer. There's the slogan, "Don't buy into the Israeli occupation." I mentioned last night Stephen Sizer being on the steering committee of the Balfour Project. They've just held their Britain in Palestine conference in Edinburgh, seeking to overturn and condemn and repent of what Britain did in issuing the Balfour Declaration. There's Stephen Sizer's website, 10th of July 2012. He was rejoicing in the decision made by the Church of England General Synod in the north of England to back EAPI. A previous speaker spoke about EAPI, the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine, Israel. It's a Quaker movement backed by the World Council of Churches. The Church of England took an unprecedented step in supporting EAPI. This is Reverend Dr. Stephen Sizer in Tehran, 2007, before the cameras of the Islamic Republic News Agency. I've described Sizer as the undisputed champion of Christian Palestinianism. The website of the IRNA on October 2007 said this: the British author said that the Zionists have distorted remarks by President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad about the conference. In other words, Stephen Sizer, an evangelical, was defending the man who in 2005 publicly called for Israel to be wiped off the map. Stephen Sizer was invited to tour Tehran and the Islamic institutions in Tehran by this lady on the left, Zahra Mostafavi Khomeini, daughter of the Ayatollah Khomeini, who led the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 that continues to spread throughout the Middle East. Stephen Sizer is very much involved, along with many of his evangelical colleagues, in Evangelical Muslim Dialogue. There he is in Toronto, Canada, 2010, a conference sponsored by the World Islamic Core Society, which was founded by Colonel Gaddafi. There he is in Tripoli in Libya. Here he is in Malaysia last year, speaking on Malaysian television in support of Viva Palestina. Viva Palestina is the organization that is behind the Gaza flotillas. And there he is at the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies in Malaysia. August this year in London, there was a Muslim demonstration outside the American Embassy to celebrate Al-Quds Day. And here was one of the speakers invited to address the audience on that occasion.
I'd like to invite Reverend Dr. Stephen Sizer, who's a vicar and a writer, to come and illuminate us with his talk. Now we can welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you. If we wish to do God's will, we will work and pray for our inclusive and inclusive city that reflects God's vision, a city of justice, peace, and reconciliation. Inshallah.
Stephen Sizer finished with this word, inshallah, taken right out of the Quran, whatever God wills. What is an evangelical Christian vicar doing quoting the name of Allah from the Quran? I talked about this last night. Palestinian Media Watch have done a lot of research on this. 2010, Jesus was a Palestinian. No one denies that, says Palestinian Authority Television. including Sami Ganadre, who said he was repeating only what Yasser Arafat had been saying for years. Jesus was the first Palestinian Shaheed. This is Mustafa Barghouti, 2009. Jesus was the first Palestinian to be tortured in this land. I mentioned last night Sheikh Mohammed Hussein, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who also in 2009 described Jesus and Mary as being Palestinians par excellence. This is the same Grand Mufti who in January this year, at the 47th anniversary of the founding of Fatah, quoted from the Hadith in which it calls, in the last days, the trees and the stones will call to the Muslims as servants of Allah. There is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. We remember Sheikh Mohammed Hussein's predecessor, the Grand Mufti Haji Min Husseini. There he is in Berlin, having an audience with Adolf Hitler, encouraging Hitler to wipe out the entire population of the Jews. So what is an evangelical vicar doing in this photograph with the Grand Mufti? This photograph was posted by Stephen Sizer on his own website February this year. This man here is a member of the Arab League. There is an Islamic agenda in full force and full sway, and evangelicals are on board with this. We shouldn't be surprised. Stephen Sizer had this photograph taken with Yasser Arafat. I mentioned last night my experience at the 5th International Sabeel Conference. That was the door, the one door into and out of the Muqatta, and this was the photograph that Sizer had with Arafat on that occasion. As I said, at the 5th International Sabeel Conference hosted by this man, Reverend Dr. Naim Atik, the founder of Sabeel, the Palestinian Ecumenical Liberation Theology Center in Jerusalem. The international patron of Sabeel is Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Here he is at a press conference with Ismail Haniyeh, one of the leaders of Hamas, Prime Minister of Hamas in Gaza. In 2001, Naim Atik, an Anglican clergyman, said this in his Easter message: Jesus is the powerless Palestinian humiliated at a checkpoint, the woman trying to get through to the hospital for treatment. In this season of Lent, it seems to many of us that Jesus is on the cross again, with thousands of crucified Palestinians around him. The Israeli government crucifixion system is operating daily. You can read in documents I'll mention my perception of Christian Palestinianism, which is a deep-rooted tree, goes back to the teachings of men like Augustine. It's amillennial, it's replacement theology, now liberation theology and fulfillment theology is feeding into this tree. And these are the fruits, the books that many evangelicals and liberal Protestants are producing all the time.
Hey, what are you doing? Just shopping. You can't buy those. Why not? Because those products support Israeli apartheid. Oh no!
We've heard the big lie repeated in this conference by Joseph Goebbels: if you tell a lie big enough, keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. February and March this year was the 8th annual Israeli Apartheid Week. Rallies were held in cities all across the world, campaigning in support of boycott, divestment and sanctions, BDS. I mentioned last night my attendance at the Bethlehem Christ at the Checkpoint Conference. Stephen Sizer was one of the organisers. We were welcomed to Palestine. Over 600 evangelicals gathered to protest against the Israeli occupation. Undergirding the Checkpoint Conference in Bethlehem was the Kairos Palestine document produced in 2009. In June of this year, the United States, churches in the United States launched Kairos USA, in which they began with a confession of sin to Palestinians in the State of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and so on. As US Christians, we bear responsibility for failing to say enough when our nation's ally, the State of Israel, violates international law. You can read more about this in documents I've written with the help of my pastor, Church at Christ Checkpoint, Prophets Who Prophesy Lies in My Name. They're available free of charge from my church and also on a number of websites. And also I've written about Christian Palestinianism in my book, For Zion's Sake. If I had time, I would show you some clips of BDS rallies in Utrecht, Holland, in Montreal, Canada, Rome, Italy, Brisbane, Australia, and I'm going to show you London, England last year. This is a supermarket in London.
Palestine! Free, free 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 Israeli goods! Boycott Israeli goods! Boycott Israeli goods! Boycott.
One more clip and then I'll sit down. Somebody else was saying exactly the same not that long ago to a much larger audience, calling for the boycott of Israel.
In einem kühnen und grandiosen Schwung haben wir die Feinde des Landes zu Taten getrieben. Um 10 Uhr hat der Gott begonnen. Er wird bis um die Mitternachtsstunde fortgesetzt. Er vollzieht sich mit einer schlagartigen Wucht, aber auch mit einer imponierenden Manneszucht und Disziplin unserer Partei und unser Führer Heil! Heil! Heil!
The first thing Adolf Hitler did when he came to power was instruct Joseph Goebbels to impose a nationwide boycott of Jewish goods and businesses. The BDS campaign has no idea that it is being driven by the same anti-Semitic, satanic spirit that drove that campaign that ultimately led to the Holocaust. And Christians, evangelical Christians, are at the forefront of this campaign.